Hi, Carlos. Welcome to Spainly Living.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Do you want to kick us off by talking a little bit about yourself? Tell us about yourself and where you moved from.
Thank you, Michelle. So, for those of you that are joining the podcast, my name is Carlos Romero. I am born and raised in New York, and I moved to Spain with my family. And a little bit more about me. So, for 3 years before moving to Spain, I worked at Harvard University as a education technology strategist, helping them launch their life science website. And it was a very incredible experience to work there. And truthfully, it was the most cultivated experience. Everyone was wonderful, and the amount of talent and creativity and innovation that was there is unmatched. And Harvard is a very special place, and will always be a very special place to me. And yeah, I have my wife, my two lovely children, and really my move to Spain really comes as a story of family. I know many people watching might have children and are saying, can I make this move? How would I do this? Well, coming from me, you can do it. And it's a process. It's a process, and you just have to be organized, be willing to do the work, and the path will open up for you. You take one step, then you get another opportunity, and just keep playing until all the opportunities add up, and then you're in Spain.
Beautiful. What prompted you to move to Spain specifically? Were you always looking to move to Spain, or what was the idea in relation to the move?
Great question. I think for me, Spain has always been in my mind. My grandfather, my great grandfather was a goldsmith in Spain. So I would hear stories and whispers of Spain, and growing up and from in a Latin American family, Spain is always seen as this like distant but also close place at the same time. So I came to Spain for the first time on my own in 2014, I believe it was. And, you know, being in my mid 20s, it just seemed like a breath of fresh air coming from New York. And it was just very kind of a new experience because growing up in New York, so I spoke Spanish with my parents, but when I would go out to school, I was speaking English. I did all my academic training in English, got my master's in neuroscience in English. So everything was in English, but coming over, it felt at home right away because of those place connections. So then after that, it just got in my mind even more and be like, okay, could I do this? How could I do this? And honestly, if you're a parent or thinking about having children, the first thing you need to think about is your personal financial planning, right? Save money, figure out what can I cut so I can save? What do I really need? And it really becomes a analysis of values, right? It's like, do I need this Netflix subscription? No, I really don't. What I need is to read more about Spain, and that's because so many people are putting information, which is also a plus and a minus, right? Because when there's too much information, there's also information that doesn't help you, which is why I really appreciate this Spainly Living podcast, bringing you real stories of moving to Spain. That aside, so looking at the information and planning for it. So we're talking 2014. This was already an idea in my mind, and then being able to take the leap, right, and putting yourself in a situation where you can take the leap and feel good about having a comfortable landing. So after 2014, I started, making little plans, saving more, learning to invest, right? Oftentimes in underrepresented communities, this is something that's not even on people's minds. People are struggling to survive paycheck to paycheck or things like that. So
Yeah.
really doing your homework and figuring out like, okay, how do I invest? Why do I invest? Where can I put my money? And really beginning to think about risk mitigation, right? Where can I put my money so that it grows, but I don't take heavy losses? Because starting out in investing, early on, I did take some losses, but overall, in the grand scheme of things, those early losses put you in a position for greater success. So now we're talking 2018, and at this point, sometimes you need to be in a position where when luck finds you, you're ready to act on it. If you're not in a position to receive luck or receive these types of universal experiences, even though they're there and they happen, it just depends on the right time. You have to be able to snatch that opportunity. So in 2018 is when I met my future wife, Julia, and we were both in similar places at the same time. We were like kind of beginning to expand out from thinking about family or like what our future was going to be, thinking about partners, so that ready for that next step in relationship growth. But at the same time, we were both ready for the next step in professional growth. We were, at that point, maybe mid-level, but with like in our careers, but in our current organizations, there was no room for growth. So it's kind of this confluence of things. And, both of us are both avid readers. And as we started talking, we realized, hey, we really have these interesting values, shared values of travel and being good people and creating a value wherever we go, right? In communities and organizations that we're in. But we're ready for the next thing. So then at that point, I was ready to leave the job I had previous, and it was a great position. At that time, I was working at the New York Hall of Science and educating young, underrepresented groups in science and engineering. So it was everything that someone from my background could hope for. But I was ready for the next step and ready to think about having and providing for a family. So we were one day thinking about what to do next. And Julie had always talked about her love for the Spanish language and, of course, her interest in going to Spain. It was a kind of a shared interest we had. And she talked about the Camino de Santiago, which is this. If you know anything about Spain or starting to learn about Spain, that comes up automatically. The Camino de Santiago is this wonderful, incredible hike from all the different parts of Spain, all pointing to Santiago de Compostela.
I did the Camino. I walked
Yeah.
from Portugal to
Wow.
Spain, and then I also did the Fisherman's Trail in Portugal down to Sagres. It's so beautiful.
It's I agree with you, Michelle. It's completely incredible. And there's so many trails and so many ways to do a Camino. You could do it by the
Yeah.
water, by the ocean, anything, anything, anything. So then I remember we were at the Museum of Natural History in New York. And as we're waiting for tickets, I'm just checking, pie in the sky, checking for flights. And for that day, for some reason, there was a flight from New York to Paris that it was January. And this, I'm thinking already in June, right? Because as a strategist, it's something that I can't like hang up the hat when I come home, right? I'm always thinking strategy at home, strategy at work. So I was like, okay, and I'm check flights early if you're thinking about a scout trip or something like that, right? So in January there was a flight to Paris for like $120. I said to Julia, we're both ready for the next step. Let's just buy these tickets. I'm gonna buy these tickets right now. We're gonna go. And she just was like, all right, let's do it. So then we bought the ticket. Like, okay, we're going. What else do we need to do? And kind of build it back like that. And that's seriously how it is. Like you have to be in a position so when an opportunity comes, you can grab it. If I wasn't thinking in those ways at that time, and if I didn't start thinking about financial planning and family planning back in 2014, then in 2018, when this opportunity happens, then I can't grab onto it. So then we fly into Paris, we leave our jobs, we fly into Paris, we do the Camino all summer. We go all the way from Paris, curve through to Oviedo, we do the Camino Primitivo. We do the Camino Primitivo and like we just fall in love. We fall in love with Spain. And we go all the way to Santiago de Compostela. Then we add the extra hike to Finisterre, and then Finisterre. Yeah, we get to Finisterre, and as soon as we get there, you probably know where this is going. We've done the Camino. We've like invested in each other. Then I get down on one knee and I say, will you take this journey with me for the rest of our lives? And she says yes.
Beautiful.
So we have now we're engaged, and we travel to the rest of Spain. We've done the Camino, and we're applying for jobs. We're applying for jobs, applying for jobs. And my wife, she gets her job. She finds a job. At that time, we're living in New York. She finds a job in Boston to work at Boston University. So then we go to Boston. I don't have a job yet. So I'm, looking, applying, doing everything that I can. Then we get to Boston in September. 1 month passes. 2 months pass. I'm like, oh gosh, because Boston, like New York, is a very competitive field. And at that moment, I knew that the digital space was going to be this big thing, digital education, right? There was just kind of girls who code were starting to come out, all these like tech platforms for kids. And then I just, I was at the right place at the right time. Now we're talking December, and this is still 2018. There's a job posting, Harvard University. They need help building a science website. I was like, this is it. And then, long story short, I get it. I'm working at Harvard. My wife's at Boston University. We have it. We have the dream, the American dream. We buy the house. We get married. We buy the house. Our picket fence isn't white. We paint it purple to be a little different. So we have everything. Then, we're about to welcome in a child, and then we start asking the deep questions, right? Like, well, we're commuting an hour and a half into Boston and out. And so I don't know if this is gonna, like, why are we having a kid then? So I can just see them at like 8 p.m. to go to sleep. So then it's kind of thinking about the deeper questions. So our son is born, and it's a complicated time because he's born at the first wave of COVID, and that's a whole other world at that point. And it really asked us, forced us to ask the deep questions. And we said we need to start thinking about Spain, and where do we want to raise our kids? We want to raise them in a place that is affordable. We want to raise them in a place that's safe, a place where we can have good food and good quality of life and all these things. So that was the real impetus. And at that point, that begins the next leg of the journey, which is we have the motivation, and then it begins. Yeah. So then it's the how. And if your viewers are watching this or listening to this, it's all about paperwork, getting all the birth certificates, getting them certified and apostilled, and just like, as I mentioned in the beginning, little steps, little opportunities, little growth. Every time, little bit, little bit, little bit. And what seemed like a dream in 2014 started to gain traction in 2018. Now we're talking at this point, 2021. So at this point, we have everything in place. We've had our cita, our appointment at the consulate in Boston, and they look at all our financials, they look at all our documents, and they say, okay, you can come. And at this point, we're going on the non-lucrative visa because the digital nomad visa wasn't available yet in 2021. And we said, no, we want
Mhm.
to go as soon as we can. We want to be with our boy in Spain. And then we make the jump.
Did you take advice before you decided to move about what your options were? And what were your ideas about what you would do when you got here? So were you going to be working remotely? Were you able to set that up? Talk us through kind of the practical steps on obtaining the right advice and maybe setting things up. Because you mentioned that you got the birth certificates and you apostilled them. And we didn't, that's something we didn't know. So we had to pay a lot of money just reapply for a birth certificate internationally, have it apostilled, and then sent to DHL to us within the time frame needed to attend the CETA, which is the appointment here. So, can you walk us through kind of practically how you did that?
Great. Excellent questions. That's important to know. That's why I mentioned COVID, because at that time, kind of the world was like upside down a little bit. At that time, my wife is at home with our newborn, and I'm still working. And what ends up happening is that she she does all the research, kind of like, and we thought about this in like little steps. We're not gonna get the whole thing done in 1 month or anything. We kind of have to go piece by piece. So while she's with our son, I'm still working at that point remotely because everything, as you remember, is locked down. So we split up into teams. So then I'm still working remotely. She's with our son, and she's doing all the research. And my wife is truly one of the smartest people I know. She kind of goes in and go dives in, and she's like, okay, looking up all the information on her own and figuring out all the steps, like verify sources, and she has the bandwidth to do this at this point.
Amazing. But you both speak Spanish as well, right? So I
Yeah,
think that that's a benefit. It would have been really difficult, I think, to try to find the right information if the language was a barrier.
exactly. So my wife and I, we both speak Spanish. We both read Spanish, and we were able to kind of piece it together bit by bit. And obviously, trusting verified sources and things like that. Ultimately, as we were getting close to kind of like halfway in our journey, we decided to also take a course. So we took a course with other people interested in moving to Spain, and that kind of filled in the gaps that we had. So it's in life, it's always a combination of things. You need to do the self study, but you also need the kind of the course to help fill in the gaps, because there's a lot of things
Mm,
that you can figure out on your own, but then with a course it sprinkles in the things, and at that point it verifies certain things, like, oh hey,
mm,
this thing was right, hey, this thing was right, but we needed to just do X, Y, and Z to make it 100%. And along with that, also as we were doing our own research, we also noticed like, hey, this course, they didn't talk about E and F, so we should look that up on our
mm,
own. And setting all that up, one of the biggest things that I've seen that some courses back then didn't talk about was the digital move to Spain, right? Like setting
mm.
up your bank accounts, how to get a bank account, setting up your bank account, how to get a cell phone in Spain, and things like this. Because you need, at that point, then you need your Spanish number and all these things. So kind of like piecemealing self-study and courses, we were able to gather the information, go to our cita, our appointment, get our visa, and then come over. But so at that point, we also had to find like a place to live without being there, right? And at that point, we used the online rental services to figure out where can we get a house for like a month, and then kind of get boots on the ground and start to see it. And we had certain areas in Spain in mind, and that begins a whole other topic of. And back then, you could see it a little bit where some people don't want to rent to foreigners in certain parts of Spain, and in other parts of Spain, they're like, "Hey, come on in," and it makes a lot of sense because there, as with any like population, we want to be people that are respectful to the community and are contributing. And there are stories of people come and they get a little rowdy, and it just makes it harder for the rest of us. So I think coming here, figuring out getting that 1 month rental, and then figuring out, okay, where do we land, and that begins a whole other topic of figuring out where to land and how to do that.
And how did you choose that? How did you choose the area specifically? Because for us, Alicante was never on our radar, and it was kind of like, as you say, we had to be in the right position to wait for that opportunity to present itself. And it did, by a local Spanish friend saying to us, "You need to try out this place. That's a bit of a hidden gem." And what I've been so incredibly amazed by running the business networking is just the caliber of incredible professionals that we're meeting here, which you didn't expect, I think, in a little town in Spain. But I feel like we kind of lucked out. We've got everything we would need: beaches, mountains to hike, a lovely city, all kinds of delicious cuisine, and fantastic schools as well, which is for us was a really a good find. But for yourself, how did you go about that journey of finding the spot?
That's a great question. And your viewers may hear this said in many different ways. And I'll say it again because it is true. Try it before you buy it.
Mm,
So we started off in Mallorca, and we had at that point we had a 6 month rental, and it was great and it was beautiful, but it didn't quite have the services that we wanted. Okay, so more researching, more looking at blogs and looking at web resources and figuring out the most important thing is what are your values, right? And at that point, we had our firstborn, and we were expecting a second, who was born eventually in Spain, in Sevilla. So we went Mallorca, Sevilla. So we're in Sevilla, and Sevilla is a beautiful city. And at the same time, it's also true that the heat is a level of heat that if you're not used to it, it's gonna surprise you. And not only that, everybody in Sevilla knows it. So once it's summertime, and I'm sure you know this as well, Michelle, everyone just kind of leaves Sevilla. So it becomes this like empty city in some ways until September, and then people come back. So from I think the end of school, which is like mid-June, till like September, first week of September, it's like exodus and return. And we weren't quite ready for that. And we love Sevilla. We often remember the great times we had in Sevilla, but the heat in the summer was a real issue for us. So then more research, more research. We go to the coast of Granada, and we're on the beach. So then we go from not having a few services to having all the services, but it's too hot. Then we go to the coast because we want to be kind of like nestled. Now we're a family of four, like nestled a little bit, have our kids take their first steps in by the ocean, things like that. But then we come to that services question again. And from all the expat families that I've talked to, there's always this back and forth of like nature and services, kind of like you want it all a little bit. And I feel like in Spain you can find it, but you just need to be diligent and do the research. And now,
mm,
how did I find the Alicante area, right? So at this point, now we're talking 2025-ish, and AI comes out. So instead of me spending hours looking at blogs, looking at web posts, looking at, blogs from lawyers, blogs from travel influencers, school ratings. So it's all these things. When you have children, then you have to think about these things. It's another layer. So where are the good schools? How do I get there? I don't want to drive all the time, so I need a little mass transit when I can. So then using AI, I was able to just compile certain information without, and that's the thing with AI as a AI education strategist, don't give personal information. Give enough that you can kind of connect the dots afterwards, right? So I say, hey, I like Sevilla, but this is what I didn't like. I like the mass transit, didn't like the heat. Didn't have access to a beach, but I want like services that I can access for like government services. Because then once you move to Spain, then you have to do your trámites, your like transactions, administrative work with the Spanish government and with the American government. So I need to have a consulate nearby, right? I need an airport nearby as well. We were on the coast of Granada. We weren't by any airports. So then kind of like compile that information and also values, right? Like where can I go where I'm like 30 minutes from like 20 to 30 minutes from like some type of mass transit. And that's another thing. When you have little kids, you're going to have a stroller. So you need to figure out where can I get to a bus or a train or a tram that I can just hop on, right? And then kind of like did those compilings. And as a strategist, I'm always thinking about like safe cities with like low enough crime rates. No city is perfect, and no city will ever be. And we can't like idolize everything. We'll look at statistics and then compiling all of that. And then as you said, Michelle, like kind of like Alicante just like came up out of that. And it's like, oh, okay, it's not too
yeah.
big of a city. Because coming from New York and living in the Cambridge, Massachusetts area, like big cities are nice, but I don't want to live in a big city, right?
Yeah.
So Alicante is a little bit smaller, right? It has access to like the Valencia if you want to, a short flight to Barcelona or Madrid, train ride as well. So all these things start to kind of piece together. It's like, okay, okay. And then as you said, schools. There's like a plethora of like alternative schools. more traditional schools. So you can really find a lot of things. And the most important thing for your viewers, if you're moving with a family, and that's really who I'm speaking to, Michelle, is to the families who think, I don't know if I can do this. You can do it. It just takes planning. And you know what? When you have kids, and if you viewers, you have kids, you know this. 5 years go by like that, you
Yeah.
know? And if you start now, let's say you watch this and you're like, okay, I'm going to start. In 5 years, you can be here with good planning, little steps every day. So then now we're hearing we're hearing Alicante, and it's incredible.
I'm really happy to hear you saying values, to speaking about values all the time. And I really think that that resonates because for us, that was a very big part about us moving to Spain, or actually just looking for a different place to stay. We were in the UK, we were in a lovely little town in Surrey. It was really beautiful. But I think for us, the thing that was important was once we had our child to say, what do we want our life to look like? And it's really interesting that you also mentioned going through COVID, the COVID times, because I think that that gave us a little bit of a reset, a chance for us to think, where do we actually want to spend our days? How do we want to spend our days? How will our hours look like? And that was really important for us. And the fact that you took all of that, and while you were waiting and pregnant and had a child, you actually made the plans and took the steps and came and had a look around. And I think that that's pretty incredible because those are challenging times, being pregnant, and then to say, I'm going to stop, I'm going to give up my job and I'm going to try again somewhere else. That's a lot of courage. But I think that, you have to really have that conviction to say, I want my life to look like this, and this is what I'm going to do to get there. And I really love the way that you're describing how you took those steps to research and to make sure that you knew what you were getting yourself into. I mean, as far as you can, you will never know everything. There's going to be surprises and challenges. But I really like the fact that you have taken your incredible intelligence in the science arena and applied it to the move to say, let's look at this like really rationally and take it step by step. So that's really incredible. And the way that you found Alicante, I think that that's really cool because it's almost values led. What do I want my days to look like? And that's really beautiful. And so you're here, and tell us about that.
So we've come to the Alicante region, and we really love it. And as Michelle, you were saying, and it's 100% accurate. You have the beaches, you have the mountains, and with young kids, they need things to do. You got to take them to the beach. You got to tire them out. You got to take them to the mountains, tire them out. We have zoos. We have like different stand up. Like we have a stand up paddleboard, so we go stand up paddleboarding with the kids. And so we land in the Alicante region, and for the first time, my wife and I, after having kids, we feel like our values are aligned because we have access to the services and we have access to the nature. So then now we can start thinking about kind of like the next step, right? So like making it sustainable, right? So then now that we've landed, then and we've been in Spain long enough now that we can begin to access the public healthcare system. We can begin to think about public schools in Spain and private schools in Spain, and we're in the next level of thinking. And along with that, being entrepreneurs and beginning to launch our businesses, and all these things are possible with time, kind of like getting to this point. As I mentioned before, so I started off as a science in the science education background, and when AI comes out, it's this whole big thing, and people want to sell you quick solutions and easy solutions and download this and you don't need expertise anymore. I have to say wrong, wrong, wrong. It's because, and this is what I tell clients, and this is what I tell people that I speak with. Imagine giving a car to imagine not even that. Imagine giving a Porsche to a 16-year-old and saying, don't run any red lights. That will never happen. The same thing is true with AI. You need guardrails, responsibility, understanding risk mitigation, all these things that influencers in like a 30-second clip aren't selling you. And now that my wife and I are in Spain, she's launching her business. I'm beginning to launch my business and making it sustainable. And everything comes with costs, right? For example, when we moved to Spain, the US license is the most important thing. If you take something away from this, a very practical thing, because we're all about practical solutions here. When you move to Spain, your US license is only valid for a couple months here in Spain. So then I had to start all over again from getting my Spanish license all the way from the beginning, taking the written exam and then doing a practical exam. I mean, that's hard. That's like one of the hardest things you have to do in Spain that nobody talks about. They want to talk about pick your place to live, go to this tapas bar. But no, I'm going to give you the real like difficult things so that you're not surprised. So I had to do the whole written test for driving instructions in Spanish. You could do it in English, but because I speak Spanish, I did it in Spanish.
So you couldn't transfer your driver's license directly to a Spanish driver's license.
Not from the United States, no. And that's like a caveat that a lot of people don't know. And it makes complete sense because in the US, there are no like roundabouts, right? There is no like yield. There's just green lights and go and red light and stop. So I had to do the entire thing from the beginning in Spanish, which was good because now when I go to the mechanic or have to do things that the ITV, which is like their DMV, I speak with them in Spanish and they tell me and understand, right? And the other thing is the Spanish driver's test, you have to, the physical driving test is done with a manual car. And growing up in New York, I could only drive automatic. So then that's another learning curve that we didn't expect coming from the US. So now this is a
Yeah.
strictly US thing. And that's a surprise that isn't really talked about, but it's an important surprise if you're coming from the US. If you're coming from other parts of Europe, I'm sure there's some sort of like co-evaluation of some kind. But from the US, that's not the case.
Yeah, that's a really important one I think people need to be aware of. It's not just about having to redo the license and learn to use a manual car instead of an automatic car, which I think it can be quite a steep learning curve, particularly in Spain, where I find driving quite challenging. I think you can rent a car for up to 90 days and then that's it. You can't use your driving license after that. That's quite a good one to be aware of. And in terms of the practicalities of the move, I know that you had done the move initially when you were also scoping out the areas. But in terms of kind of the practical moving steps, is there anything that you can suggest to people, particularly with moving with children? What did you do to make that as easy as you possibly could? Because that can be quite challenging, not only on a physical, having to carry things around and decide what to do, but also on a kind of an emotional and a mental way.
That's a great point. And the one thing that my wife and we kept reminding ourselves, and I hope that your viewers remember this too. They have pants in Spain. Like you want to bring your clothes, you want to bring your bed, you want to bring toys and things like that. Like they have pants in Spain, they have shirts, they have toys in Spain. So and it goes back again to the values thing, right? Like what are we willing to part with and what are we willing to take, right? And at that point we had our house. It was a house with full of all the house things that you can imagine outside of Boston, Cambridge, and so we had to figure out like, okay, we got to get rid of some stuff, and not some stuff, like 90% of it. I know, and talking with other expats, some people they want to do, let's get the shipping container and ship it all over. But I ran the numbers, and it's actually more expensive to put your stuff and ship it over than to just sell your stuff, deal with the emotional impact of certain things. Certain things are going to be sold that you're not going to want sold. Certain things maybe a loved one can accept into their home, but that is actually more cost effective because when once you have boots on the ground with kids, you need to think about like, okay, where am I taking my kids today? What do I do if they ask me for ice cream? What do I do if they want this new toy? So it's like managing all the present expectations and emotions and values with future expectations, emotions, and values. Right? They're not gonna remember a cardboard book they had when they were 9 months old, but they will remember if Papa and Mama are listening and for my birthday, they got me X, Y, and Z thing, for example, right? For my like fifth birthday. And so like making those decisions, that's why I always tell people move when your kids are younger
Mhm.
because when they're older, and I've met expat parents who moved when their kids were older, and it's more difficult for them to make the transition because they have friends, they're starting to make their social identities and things like that, which is good. But the earlier you make the move, it's going to be a smoother transition later on. So I would say I my wife and I we did it with a 18-month-old. We made the move, right? And then our second was born in Spain. You might have, I don't know, maybe others might have older kids, but the younger they are, the more adapted that they'll be. And I've heard stories also where older kids that move, they just have struggled. They're not quite as flexible socially because you start to make those foundations socially. So earlier is better. And if you have older kids, just talk to them. And kids are we're working with kids for over a decade. I can tell you, kids, when you sit down and talk to them like people, you say and tell them kind of like what you're thinking, what your expectations are, but more importantly, what are your hopes, right? And people oftentimes will get behind hope. And that's kind of like my biggest message for parents. If you have kids already, you can still do it. It takes planning. And bless my father, I love him so much. At the time when I got married, he put my arm on my shoulder and he said in Spanish because he's Spanish, but I'll translate it to English. He said, "Son, if you're not sure what to do, make a spreadsheet." My father was a math teacher, so that was his advice when I got married. Make a spreadsheet, and you know what? He was right. Make make a spreadsheet. Doesn't matter if you put emotions. Doesn't matter if you put like financial data, pro con list. Make a spreadsheet. Man. Make a spreadsheet, and then you're accountable at that point. Then you like click it when it's done. Click it, and like the clicking is like the thing that's like, okay, hey, I ordered the birth certificates. Okay. Hey, I got them apostille. Okay. Hey, I got them translated. Okay. And then it like little by little, it's like a different kind of dopamine that you get than like doom scrolling on social media versus like, hey, I'm actually getting stuff done.
Yeah, that's a really important point. I think we can get stuck in the dream of the move and doing the research, watching the videos, listening to the people, doing the lessons and all that thing. But it is a really important task to actually get it written down, understand what it is that you want out of the move, because moving is one of the most challenging things that you'll do in terms of your time. It's costly, and also you don't want to feel like it was the wrong move. I mean, there's always options to move and change things, and everything is an experience. But there are some elements of Spain that are quite challenging. It's not a utopia. There is no utopia. I grew up in Cape Town, which is amazing. I love it, but we can't be there with our child because I don't feel for him that I can make a decision in relation to his safety in Cape Town. That's a decision he gets to make. And so I think you can think of Spain as this kind of amazing place where everything's perfect, and it really isn't. It has its challenges, but the great thing is that there is opportunity if you are going to be willing to, as you say, work, put your information together, and really just spend the time doing the things that are going to move that needle for you. You spoke about setting up your businesses here as your entrepreneurs. How have you found that particularly? Has it been quite a challenge, or do you feel that that's kind of starting your business here has been worthwhile? Because it can be challenging in that Spain doesn't value entrepreneurship the way that potentially the US or the UK would.
That's an excellent question, and I'm glad we got to this because I want to make it as practical as possible. No pie in the sky, just practical. So starting a business here in Spain is everything that you said all at once. It's challenging, but also filled with opportunity, right? One of the things I noticed, my wife and I both starting our businesses in Spain, is that organization and people often want to go to the big and established thing. Whatever it is, they want to go to the big and established thing, right? And when you try to reach out to people and make meetings or like apply for different opportunities, they want you to have like the specific degree for that thing. And it's almost as if like industry experience is like here, but like your degree is here, right? But that's not kind of how the world works anymore. But Spain is kind of stuck in that kind of like world a little bit. So it's about being flexible, right? And figuring out different ways to provide value, right? And I think that's like both the blessing and the anchor of social media, right? Because there's people just throwing things at you, and then you kind of have to sift through it to find the value. But ultimately, I believe that if you provide a value ends up rising to the top as time goes on, right? So I think that's the difficult part, really. But at the same time, I think the European market has a lot of potential over the US market. So that's why we're having our businesses here in Spain and of course the Europe and the EU, right? Because from here we can access different markets a little bit easier. If I wanted to reach out to collaborators in North Africa, I can also my overlap time with Southeast Asia is a little more favorable than if I was in Boston or New York. So these opportunities kind of open up in different ways you might not think about. The other thing, to your point, practical, in New York and in Cambridge, people know me. So I can leverage my networks in those areas and be like, "Hey, oh, I remember. Hey, I see you're working on this. Okay, cool, right?" Or if I'm having a coffee in Harvard Square and I run into a colleague or a former colleague and I say, "Oh, I haven't seen you in so long," and we start chatting and like these opportunities for like connection coming to a new country and a new region aren't there. And it's kind of in the same way as we talked about driving school, kind of like you're building your network from scratch again as well, right? And kind of figure out, okay, where can I provide value? Who can I talk to? Who can I meet, right? And at the end of the day, you have to have value to provide, right? And by providing value, and it's one of the things from, and I'm going to my science background, like attracts like, right? Water will always associate with water, oil will always associate with oil, things like this, right? And so when you provide value, other value providers kind of see that and end up kind of begin to slowly create your own sphere. The nice thing with Alicante is that it really is it's like a dynamic international city, but it also retains the Spanish character. So like I'm beginning to build that being new to Alicante, beginning to build my network of expat expat colleagues and friends and at the same time building my network of Spanish colleagues and friends, you know? So it becomes this very interesting opportunity to kind of, especially if you're proficient enough in both languages, then you can really create value. And once you're in Europe, it becomes truly apparent that speaking multiple languages is an incredible benefit. And I'm so excited to raise two kids in this kind of opportunity. They're going to speak English, they're going to speak Spanish, they'll pick up other languages along the way. And yeah, and that's the practicality of it. You're kind of starting over from everything at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that too. I find it quite refreshing, actually. Our son goes to school with some children who are 4 years old and can speak almost three languages, which I find so inspiring and really cool, actually. I'd love him to be able to communicate. And that it also just means that we're closer to different people, different kinds of people, different kinds of ideas. And because we are expats, we can bring all the information and the knowledge that we've gained from wherever we've been to enrich our lives here in Spain and enrich the Spanish economy as well. I think there is something really important to say, hey, we're here, we're not taking anything from the economy, but we're putting value into the economy, which I find is quite jarring with the way that sometimes in Spain there is this kind of anti-foreigner message. And I understand it. I mean, everywhere we go, there are tourists as well who come in and don't treat the place properly. People are buying houses and it's pushing housing prices up. And so I understand that. I mean, coming from South Africa, we've got the same or similar issues. But I think that there is something to be said about people who want to build and want to create value, like you say. And what's heartening to find is that not only down here where we are, but in all of these little hubs around Spain, there are expats. There are people wanting to build things and to create businesses and to improve, processes slowly and slowly, so that over time, hopefully, Spain can kind of catch up with where other countries are in terms of, like you say, providing services and just modernizing as it needs to be. Because I think Europe has been kind of lagging behind Asia in terms of it's also a mindset thing. And I think it's good that you protect your culture. I love the fact that Alicante is Spanish because we moved to Spain to be in Spain. So I think that that's really, really awesome. Was there anything about the move that you found that was harder than you maybe expected?
Yeah. I think for us, like getting the documents and having all our eggs in a row, that was difficult but doable. I think going back to kind of getting rid of the material things that you have, right? Like putting it on Facebook Marketplace, like a flea market, just giving stuff away, goodwill, and some things you just have to throw away, right? And I think shedding those things becomes difficult for me as an academic, right? Like, oh man, I had living outside of Cambridge, man, I had my library, oh man, all my like textbooks and all my references, right? Like obviously we're speaking before the times of AI, right? So that for me was like painful to get rid of. But it kind of pushes me in a way. And it's like, okay, it's like, what do I really need to know? Right? Like what expertise do I need to carry in here versus like what first principles do I need to have to derive the knowledge that I need at that time. And now, of course, with AI and online resources, if there's something I don't quite remember, but I know how to get there and how to ask the question for it, I can retrieve that information and be like, oh, right, that's right. That's how that pathway works. Oh yeah, that's right. That's how that equation goes. Okay, cool. So and then it's like understanding that, having that emotional maturity to get rid of things. Another hard part is, you have networks, as I said before, you have networks. I had networks in New York, networks in Boston, Cambridge area, and kind of leaving those behind as well, because you feel like you've cultivated that for multiple decades. And, you know, friends that are real friends, they will stay, right? Friends that were like just work friends, they're just going to be work friends, and that's okay too, right? And kind of leaving those things behind, and also being open to meet new people as well, right? Because those people that you have cherished memories with, all of you have grown up, and maybe values are a little bit different, priorities are a little bit different. And now moving to Spain is kind of like asking yourself who I am and finding people that align with that. So a lot of the things that are the difficult parts, it's not the administrative part because you can manage that. It ultimately becomes like the self and understanding who you are and who you want to be. And like those things become the really difficult parts because you can't hide that by closing your laptop. You can't hide that by like changing your shirt, right? Because that's always looking at you every time you do anything.
Yeah. That's really interesting, and I agree with you. It's almost like these life challenges that force you to grow and improve. And a move can be sort of a clearing out of who you used to be and reassessing where you are, your values, the things that you really do prioritize. Particularly with children, I think having children is already that first step in saying, what are my values? Where do I want to be? And how do I want my life to look like? And how do I want my children's lives to look like? I think that's a really big one. But in relation to the move, I think there's always going to be this element of everything is new, everyone is new. it can be very scary. You can feel very unsupported, particularly internationally, where you don't have people here. But what I think for me anyway is that I know the value of community. Growing up in South Africa, we weren't very wealthy and we lived in a really racist little town. And well, it was, 1980s South Africa. But what I found so incredible was that even people who had nothing would always sort of go out of their way to share. And because I think that as humans, we have this intrinsic currency of kindness. That's what I call it. I think we know that if we help people, they will help us, and that we can't do it alone, and that we do need that community. There's this concept of Ubuntu in South Africa, and it's actually written into our constitution. And it's like, I am because we are. It is about community. It's about saying that we are stronger if we're together, if we support each other, if we're working together. And for me, that's a core belief. It's always been exactly a part of me and who I am. And I really do believe that humans are incredible magic beings. I mean, seeing my son grow up, how can you not believe that we're just at in our hearts really, really incredible? And I choose to say we're stronger together and find ways of collaborating, find ways of working together because even the people in the world who are damaging the world, like the Trumps and the Putins and whatever, these are human beings at their core, but they've had experiences, they've probably taken decisions. And I do think that it's sad and unfortunate that people like that, their decisions can have such a severe consequence on the lives of people, and that they don't necessarily like their whatever the narcissistic tendencies are, they decide not to empathize with that or acknowledge that. But I think ultimately moving to another country as an expat, I've never been from wherever I've been. So I've always been a foreigner from birth because my parents were expats to South Africa. They were immigrants. My dad was a refugee into South Africa. And, I've never been from where I am. I'm not South African. I'm not Portuguese. I'm not Spanish. Wherever I've been, I'm not from there really. I mean, I'll count myself as South African, but I think you have to be willing to open yourself up and accept some of the things about the country you're in and just kind of accept it as is and not push against it. But I think that also it is also important to make sure, like you say, like the values are aligned. And I found that very telling. In the UK, I loved living in the UK. I loved the fact that everything worked and that it was so sort of functional. But when I had my child, I decided, how do I want my child's life to look like? And when we came for our scoping trip to Spain, everyone was just playing with him. He was welcomed into every restaurant. We met people on the beach and they were so lovely with him. And for me, it was like, I want my child to grow up somewhere where he feels wanted and valued and part of the culture and community. So for me, that community piece has been really important. And I think it was the month after I arrived, I launched a business networking event because I just decided if I want to do something in Spain, it's up to me to create that community. So I think that you can find places where you can meet people, like you say, like attracts like. You can meet people who are like you or think like you or have the values that you have, or you can just do it yourself. And what was that? That was about 8 months ago. And this is the first month we're going to be having it. And we're at capacity. You know, I think that that's incredible. People have responded because they see the value of creating that community, and it could be something simple like set up a WhatsApp group with people that you meet. Set up a Facebook group. There's so many options now. Eventbrite events are free. You can set up LinkedIn groups for professional groups. You can set up Facebook groups for private groups, and you can kind of create these communities and find people. I think if you're sitting at home, that can be very difficult to kind of meet the people who are going to enrich your experience.
100%, 100% agree. And I think often people, when they're thinking about making a move to Spain, they feel that like they feel alone, and that's a valid feeling because you're going to a new place. But like we've both been saying, like how you just said now, the community aspect of it, like especially if you have kids, you will find that your kids are the best networkers because they will find kids who they enjoy playing with. And then, like, because of that, you'll start talking to parents, like, oh, hey, we just moved to the area. And little by little, you get these associations. And just like you said, you make a little group online and they say, hey, I'm going to go to the park. Does so and so want to go on Thursday at this time? I'm like, yeah, sure. Like, slowly build like that. And never count out the power of kids because children are so good at finding people with good values, finding kids with good values, and then in turn finding the parents with good values. And then you vibe. And that's how my wife and I, we've made many of our friends is through our kids. So if you're thinking if you and your partner or whoever's watching this are thinking you're gonna make the move and it's just you two, no, it's not just you two. It's the whole family is gonna make the move, and your kids will surprise you, 100% guarantee.
Absolutely. I mean, I see drop-offs, school drop-offs and pickups as just times to socialize because there are incredible people who are parents at the school that we take our child to. And I absolutely believe, and I think that that should come from you though. So if you're open to saying hello, just giving a smile, even if, we don't speak Spanish really well yet. We learn every day in the car on the way to school, but we try to say hello and be friendly, and people resonate with that, and I've been really amazed and excited by just the amount of incredible human beings we've been lucky enough to meet here. And I feel really privileged. I wouldn't have thought, saying goodbye to our friends in the UK was hard, especially for my kid, because he had his sort of bestie. And it's going to be emotional. Like you say, giving away all your stuff. There's an air fryer, like a 15-in-1 air fryer, Ninja air fryer. We still think about today. We used to do like pressure cooking in it. We used to do pasta bakes. And it was amazing, but we gave it away. Not that we couldn't get one here, but you know what I mean? Like there's things that you give away that you're like, oh, we should have probably brought it. But I agree with you. I think less is probably more. And you figure out there's that whole minimalist movement. You figure out what the really valuable things in your life are, and you're not kind of stuck and tied to your things. What would you think that you'd do differently if you were moving to Spain today?
I mean, honestly, we talked about finding the place where you want to be, right? As I mentioned before, my wife and I and our family were in Mallorca, Sevilla, Costa Granada, Alicante, right? And as a parent, you know that like moving has a cost, right? Financial cost, emotional cost. I would say do the research, but more importantly, find your values, right? Like find what you're looking for. And that takes time. And my wife and I, we've been on this journey and it's really forced us to find our values and find out what we're willing to negotiate on and make fruitful compromises on. And I think if you have those conversations before you go, then you can make the move maybe once or twice and get here. And you don't know about what you don't know about yourself. And it takes a partner to kind of bring that out of you as well. So what I would do differently is kind of sit down and say like, "Hey, what do we want from Spain?" Right? And it's true, you want to find like the balance of nature and services. And I really do feel like, and in terms of those two plus cost, I feel like the Alicante region really provides you with that. So that's what I would suggest. Sit down with your partner or whoever you need to sit down with. Be like, what do we want this move to be? So that way we can maximize it when you get there.
Amazing. And what have been your biggest positives about your move and your life in Spain so far?
Man, the biggest positive, there's so many, that's why. It's like hard to pick, but I think the time the time that I can spend with my little ones, right? Like I tell whenever when you come to Spain inadvertently, it's gonna be a roller coaster, right? And and I tell myself and I talk about it with my wife. I say, a lot of people who had the career I had in Cambridge and the direction that it was going, I feel that most people wouldn't leave that. I really do because it's so tempting though. It's so tempting. But for me, seeing my little boy in my arms, I was like, no, man, I gotta make a change. I need to make it now, and this, or if not now, as soon as possible, right? And the change you make now is make that spreadsheet, as my father would say, make the spreadsheet and list it all out. And it's a time that I can spend with my family. Like your kids are only young for a handful of years, and I might not take a client here. I might not, stay up late this night, but the time that you can spend with your kid, that's invaluable. When they're older and then they're like, yeah, I'm just gonna go to my room and do this thing. Yeah, I'm just gonna go, then you'll have all that time. Then you can do all the things, make the big money you want to make. Yes, that time will be there, but this time now is what I'm grateful for. And that's the thing that for my move is has been the biggest impact. Time with your kids. Because what was I gonna do? Work, work in Cambridge, commute an hour and a half, wake up at 6 a.m. to meet partners in the Eastern Hemisphere, stay till like 9 p.m. meeting with partners in like on the West Coast. And I would like be a zombie and never be awake. But here I can make my little moves and still, have a good life and have that time with my kids and worry about the late nights and the important clients when my kids are older.
I think that's beautiful. That's exactly what we experienced as well. And my mom died very early. She died at 52. And it just forced me to reassess those days, right? What do you want the days to look like? And when I had my son, it was like, it really did put everything into perspective for me and it helped me to prioritize as ruthlessly as I needed to. I was also in corporate London, bringing in the salary, and it's really like you say, it's a really beautiful gilded cage. It's a beautiful track. And I sometimes feel that when I go back home to South Africa, I've got friends who are partners in the law firms and have these really important jobs and have massive mansions, but it's all in a cage. You're behind bars, your beautiful bars, lovely bars, but it's a jail that you've created. And I feel that there is a sense of freedom in my life now that we didn't even have in the UK, and I agree with you. I would have to wake up before my son woke up, take the train into the city, and then get home once he was down. And I thought, that's not okay. And you know what? I'm glad I made that decision then, because even though you go through a lot of pain and hardship having to say goodbye, great salary, and even now we're nowhere near what we were earning. But it doesn't really matter because one, it's much cheaper to live in Spain than it is in the UK at the moment. And two, we're able to have a much better lifestyle. We're able to put him into a private school where he gets real attention, and we're able to kind of leverage those elements of our lives to create a life that we want. And we often joke that we're almost semi-retired because we work on our own schedule. We work hard where we work. And we still have the same drive, we still have the same ambitions, but we've realized that we don't need to sacrifice the time with our children when they're young to have the things that we want. And I agree with you entirely. You know, my son is almost 5 and those years have flown by. And sometimes I look back and I say, how did it go so quickly? But the fact that we can some days after school here, we just go to the beach and we sit on the beach, even in the middle of December, even when it's not hot, we just have a lovely little spot and we just have a coffee and a juice or something on the beach. And it's such a much more relaxing environment and it helps you to breathe. And I think that in our space where we were in the UK, when it's dark by 3 p.m., it's not conducive to be able to just spend that quality time together with your children. And I think that that's been a massive shift for us as well. And absolutely worth it. Do you think so? Just absolutely worth it.
Yeah, I totally agree. You couldn't have said it any better. Like on a random December, on a school day, just going, sitting on the beach, half an hour, just like enjoying the Mediterranean, kind of letting it all take in. That's a different kind of wealth. And exactly what you said, my bank account isn't as big as it would have been if I would have stayed at Harvard. That's 100% true. But I always look at my wife and our kids are playing on the beach and I tell her we're rich in soul. And that's the kind of wealth I want to have and leave for my kids.
100% agree with you. So last question. What is the advice that you'd have wanted to have before you moved to Spain? So talk to yourself a year ago and tell yourself what would you have wanted to know?
That's the best question to end this on. And what I would tell myself, the journey to move a family to Spain is about inner work and inner growth. And those are the things that aren't like sexy, like take this like energy drink, take this thing. No, it's like the inner the hard work. And that's work that happens when the kids are asleep, our partner is asleep. The in those few moments that are the quiet moments that you get as a parent, that's where the inner work happens. And going back and telling my younger self before I got married, before I had kids, focus on that. Focus on the inner work. Know who you are and know what you value, and then the rest will come off of that. And that's been my biggest struggle, honestly, because going from as you said, we're going from these like high powered jobs and going from the gilded cages coming to live in Spain is an act of humility, right? It's an act of prioritizing your values, but it's an act of doing the inner work. And if I would have prepared for that inner work as I prepared for my spreadsheets, if I would have done the inner work, more inner work then that would be paying off even more now. Even though the payoff now is like immense moving to Spain, the inner work I think makes it a softer landing because once your inner work is under control and you understand who you are and what you can and what you cannot do, that helps you in your interactions with your wife, with your kids, when you're going to citas, when you're going to the mechanic, like understanding those things helps you in the long run. So that's what I would say. Do the inner work. That's part of your move. So apostille, meetings, inner work, journal, figure yourself out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you need to have done some inner work to keep calm during the CETA appointments because it depends on who you get. Sometimes these guys can be quite grumpy.
Absolutely.
Which makes it really crazy. While you were saying that, something that popped in my head was when we first moved, we would get quite annoyed because there were this group of people outside of our window every night until late, say like 11, 12, whose dogs kept barking. And we just thought, it's so annoying. Why do you have to come and sit outside of our apartment making a noise with your dogs barking? And we had to take a little step back and say, how cool is it actually that these guys, it's just this kind of like maybe a group of 5 or 6 older people. Every single night, they just come and sit there with their dogs and have like the nicest chats and just hang out together in this kind of public little square. And I just thought, you know what? It could be annoying that the dogs are barking, but actually, it's quite cool that these guys get to debrief and have some time with their friends in the evenings where I feel like in our lives until then we didn't really see that. That's not really the norm to just like be sitting on the pavement outside in the UK. So I think that that's kind of a beautiful description of the values that they hold in Spain around community and friendships. Well, welcome to Spain. Thank you for your time today, Carlos.
Likewise. And I am excited for every Spainly living episode. I mean, yeah, like wishing you continued success. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.